Hey, 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 Fitmama. Jen Oliver here, your host of the Fitmama podcast. This is the work in to your workout. Hey, Fitmama, welcome. Today I am interviewing someone I have wanted on the podcast for a while. If you don't follow her yet, go right to the show notes and find her. She is awesome. This is Nikki Bergen. Nikki is a former professional dancer, and she has dedicated her life to creating groundbreaking fitness programs, the Belle Method and the Bump Method, designed specifically for women that combine Pilates and pelvic health, creating choreography from science. All her work is inspired by Pilates and her background in dance, and it's informed by science and created to help women feel strong and confident. Her deepest hope is to help women develop a new appreciation for their bodies, feel empowered with knowledge, and to discover their true strength. Oh, she does that so well in her online work and in her in-person work where she actually teaches classes. She goes into how many and what she does and her background, and we dive into a whole bunch of questions. She also shares some very exciting news for her right now, and you can follow along her journey at all the links in the show notes today. Enjoy! All right, Fit Mamas, here we are with the amazing Nikki Bergen from the Bump Method and the Belle Method on Instagram, online. She is awesome all around the world. Welcome today. Thank you for being here, Nikki.
Oh my goodness, Jen, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're adorable. This is honestly something that I have been thinking about having you on the podcast after I've been following you for literally years. So I can't wait to dive into all your knowledge because I know the Fit Mamas are going to benefit from what you talk about. And they will all be following you online after this. And we'll include all your information in the show notes so no one has to take notes or, run to websites right now. They can just listen to all the information you're going to share with us. And we're just going to dive right into how did you get started to even understanding the pelvic floor and the deep inner core?
I love it. So I was a dancer in my 20s, like teens and 20s, and basically got into Pilates, so not pelvic floor, when I injured my knee in my mid-20s, and then I fell in love with Pilates because I saw the impact that it had on me, and I went through all of my comprehensive training and the anatomy and everything. And pelvic floor was not really mentioned. It was like sort of this abstract, like engage your powerhouse. That's what we used to say in Pilates. And it's kind of this vague thing because nobody likes to say rectum or vagina. Like it's just powerhouse, and it was a bit vague. Anyhow, so I started getting into Pilates. I started at a physiotherapy clinic, at a sport medicine clinic, and I started it was great because I was learning so much so quickly, and I started having pregnant women coming to see me in the classes that I had started there, and I realized you guys need your own thing. Like this is pretty specialized. And I also remember teaching some, at the time I was still teaching more like traditional fitness, like boot camps, and I remember one particular boot camp, there were a bunch of women, I would say about half the class. So these were all, I would say, moms in their late 30s, early 40s that had a few kids. And they were like, oh, I can't do that. I'm not wearing a liner. And all of a sudden, one woman said that. And then I think about four more chimed in and said, oh, me too. And they laughed about it.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, is this a thing that just happens when people have kids? Like, this doesn't seem right to me.
Especially to laugh about it, right? Like, just to not even think that it's something that we could change, right?
Yeah. And so I was, at that time, I was still in my, I would say at this point, maybe 26, 27. Yeah. And I remember thinking, it's kind of weird. Like, I need to learn more, knowing that I wanted to have kids one day.
Yeah.
And, and I thought, I feel like women need more information. And I've always been like a natural kind of researcher. I've always been curious. And I could tell that this was something that I wanted to dive more into. And then from there, I just did a whole bunch of certifications. I did my pre-postnatal, I did through Pilates, through Canfor Pro, which is like Canadian ACE or NASM, all these certification bodies. And I still didn't get, like the nitty gritty. And I was like, okay, like this is all vague. Like with pregnancy, it was like, keep your heart rate under this amount. I'm like, no, let's talk about like peeing your pants. Like, what's up with that? Like I wanted to know that, like what's pelvic organ prolapse? I'd never heard that. And so I did a bunch of, and I started to really dive in more. And I got very fortunate in that I met a woman who is a pelvic floor physical therapist and a professor at McMaster University here in Ontario, in Hamilton. And she became my mentor. And I learned so much from her. And I continue to learn from her. And she sends me research. And I go to her workshops. And she's kind of a bit of a sounding board. So she helped me create several online programs, and she sort of vetted everything. And she was really like instrumental in, my building of knowledge in this field.
Wow. Well, you know what? I mean, I know that a mentor can make all the difference in the world. And for you to have found one, especially prior to having kids, that's such a gift, because then you had all this information.
Yeah, I had a pretty awesome dream team.
Yeah, you did. That's so great. So who introduced you to the pelvic floor physio, and how did you first
I think I met her because I reached out to a clinic that was opening that I had heard of. And I was like, I want to collaborate with you guys. Like, I teach a lot of women. They were opening a birth-focused, it's called The Womb, The World of My Baby. So I reached out to them and I said, guys, like, do you offer these types of classes? I offer classes. Anyways, and she's one of the part owners. So I had a meeting with the three owners, and she's one of the owners, and that's how we met.
Oh, very cool. Okay, so that opened you up to the whole world of pelvic floor. Now, did you find that pretty much none of your clients had any ideas about pelvic floor or were told anything about it?
I know that it is changing significantly. So I'm 38. Okay. So I got my certification 12 years ago. So I've been at this Pilates thing for quite some time. And prior to that, I was teaching body movement. I was teaching fitness classes, dance fitness classes, hip hop, like salsa, licious, you name it, like step class. I've taught it all. Yeah. So I've been teaching movement for a very long time. And I would say, I didn't really get into pelvic health probably for the first, I would say, 5 years of teaching Pilates. And then I started realizing, so for the past 7 years, I've really been doing a lot more pelvic floor stuff. And I realized that now people are talking about it more. Yes. But here in Toronto, there's tons of pelvic floor physical therapists. We're very fortunate. But I have a ton of women who follow me from other countries around the world or small towns, and they don't quite have the same resources. And so I try to post helpful information because as much as I tell everybody, you need to see a pelvic floor physical therapist, I know that's not necessarily feasible for everybody,
So true. So true. So, when someone comes to see you or someone, how do people work with you? Do you still teach classes physically, or is it all online now, Nikki?
I teach a ton of classes still.
Oh, awesome. Wow. Good
So I do both. I know. I teach a lot. I still teach about 20 classes a week here in Toronto. Wow. It's a lot. And I do teach online as well through my programs. I have a lot more people starting to ask me for online training. So that's something that I might transition more to. But I have a team of, there's 5 of us. So we teach a ton of classes in and around privates and classes in and around the GTA. And we're growing. So we're starting I'm starting a certification program. Awesome. And it's going to be, really exciting. And in that way, a lot of women have reached out and they're like, I want to help other women. I teach fitness, but I want to specialize in pelvic health. Oh, that's and awesome. So I'm building something for those people.
Well, it's so necessary because, like you said, as a trainer, and your avenue was even through Pilates, and you would think that would be more understanding of the deep core and focused on the core and engagement and proper breathing, etc. Whereas I'm sure you noticed that wasn't really rampant in fitness. And nowadays, pretty much anybody can get a trainer certification, hop over to their local gym, get a job, and start working with a very important population, that being pregnant or newly postpartum women who are coming out, lose the baby weight. Yeah. And that's somewhat scary. So can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to the pressure that a lot of women feel, both from society and self-imposed, to sort of bounce back, which I am always saying, guys, like, don't put that pressure on yourselves. Obviously, it's hard, right? It's so hard, especially if you're not happy with how you're feeling or looking. But I mean, I think that we have a tendency to put way too much pressure on women in general. Like it's crazy. And so learning that, you just did a huge thing, and whether you delivered by cesarean section or vaginally, it's a huge thing. And I actually make a point to say, side note, this is a bit of a tangent, but I had to do a heart surgery 4 months postpartum.
Yes, which was so intense. I followed your whole thing.
Oh, okay, yeah. So it was, and it's amazing. And it wasn't even like, I say heart surgery, it was considered a heart procedure. So it's not like open heart surgery. They didn't cut me open. They thread this little catheter in through your groin and your vein, and they go and they basically fix a poor or bad electrical pathway. Wow. And I have to say, like, the amount of attention that I got. I could have milked that, Jen. Like, people were like, "Oh my God, you had heart surgery!" Like, do it. I could have taken like 2 months off.
You totally
The recovery from that was a joke compared to my very simple vaginal delivery. Really? And yet, everyone assumes. Like, oh, you just had a kid, like, you're going to just, like, go on with your merry way and, like, figure out breastfeeding and, do this and, like, bounce back and go. Meanwhile, like, you have heart surgery and, like, everyone's, like, thinks that you're, you know what I mean? Yet it was completely a joke. And so I think that we need to give women a lot more credit and really give them the time and the space that they need to heal.
So
properly.
So true. And I think you're right. It comes from not only those societal pressures, but those pressures we put on ourselves, because even when people are, hey, sit down, or I got this, it's so easy to fall into that feeling of, well, I can do it all and I don't need help and I got this, So what are you seeing in terms of, what people are doing when they're pregnant, commonly right now, or what, let's say, quote unquote, should they be doing?
Well, I mean, I don't like to use the word should because, but anyways, it's a heavy word.
Yeah, I know. In an ideal world, like, what are they doing right now that we could hopefully bring them into doing something that's going to feel and work a lot better for them?
I think it depends for sure on a woman's prior activity level.
Right.
So, like, if you were a marathon runner and you want to keep running during your pregnancy and that feels good to you, like, have at it.
Yes.
But if you've never run in your life and you're just like, oh my goodness, I know I'm supposed to be healthy and active and exercise in my pregnancy, like, now's not the time to be starting, like, a lot of intense novel movement.
Yes,
and so, the intensity of your workout is going to greatly be determined by, what you're used to. Right?
Yeah.
I think that's why a lot of women gravitate towards Pilates and yoga, because it's low impact and, there's no risk of, like, if you're cycling, like, falling off your bike or running for the impact. So I think that really what we need to start teaching women is how to deeply activate their core and their pelvic floor and how to breathe properly. And I know that sounds a little bit boring because people are like, yeah, but I know how to breathe, whatever. It's actually really important. And I think you would agree with me to learn how to breathe properly with your diaphragm. And that's going to help reduce your stress. It's going to, help your nervous system. It's going to help you during labor tremendously. And it's going to help with your pelvic floor and your postpartum recovery. And so I talk ad nauseum about correct breathing mechanics, and we call it hug the baby breath, and some people call it belly pumping. There's a lot of different words you'll find when you go and scroll through Insta, but it all means the same thing.
Right. Okay. Can you describe that breathing for us?
Yeah. So a lot of women don't realize that they have tension in their pelvic floor. And a lot of us have a tendency of hiking our shoulders when we inhale, and I can actually, I'm sort of sitting at my desk here with my headphones on, kind of hunched over the computer. And I can tell even by sitting here, I'm breathing into my upper shoulders, and I shouldn't be, but it has to do with the way that I'm sitting, So if I correct that, then I can start to feel the breath go wide through my rib cage, and I'm not actually hiking my shoulders. And so it's getting your lateral costal breath. So basically learning how to breathe wide through your ribs. That's going to get your diaphragm mobilized. And if your diaphragm is working properly, which is the biggest muscle that, you use to help you breathe, if your diaphragm is working properly, then your pelvic floor is likely working properly, and then your core is working properly. So it's this sort of chain effect It starts with your breath. So if you're not breathing correctly, your diaphragm can't move correctly, that's going to mess with your pelvic floor work, and that's going to mess with your core. And that's going to cause, potentially more issues like back pain or incontinence and all these things. And so I always have to underscore, like, we have to always bring it back to your breathing. Once you master that, then let's throw some cool choreography with you. I'll show you some cool stuff, but like, it's not going to do you any good if you don't know how to breathe correctly.
So true. And are you teaching women how to breathe correctly from the point of pregnancy? Is this something that, is basically the foundation of all your programs, would you say?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the breathing, and I'll say, like, if you're not breathing, you're not doing Pilates, like lines like that when I'm on a mic in front of a group of students. But it's true. I mean, the breath work is important regardless of your stage. It's not just for pregnant women or postpartum women in general. Like, men too, we can all benefit from learning to breathe correctly because our bodies will function better.
That is, what? It's so inspiring even just to hear about this. I'm completely obsessed with the breath, so you got me on board for sure. And I talk about this all the time with the Fitmamas too. Now, I want to kind of dive right into the breathing again, in that I love what you said about if your diaphragm is working properly, your pelvic floor is working properly, etc. Now, how does one know that their diaphragm is not working properly? Like, if they don't come see you, is there a way right now they could kind of breathe and know, oh, this isn't, like, if my chest isn't going left to right, does that mean I'm tight, or what?
That's a great question. I would say that they could watch themselves in a mirror.
Okay.
Like, when you inhale, do you see any lift through your shoulders? Like, do you shrug your shoulders at all when you inhale?
Okay.
If you do, that's not awesome.
Right.
Don't freak out if it's happening, but we want to try to reduce that. And instead, I always use the cue, try to breathe east and west. Try to picture, your ribs opening sideways like an accordion when you inhale. A belly breath is very useful when you're meditating and you're relaxing. Like, think of how an infant would breathe when they sleep in their crib.
Yeah.
They get a little bit of a belly breath going on. But when you're working out and you really need to work your core, if you do like a simple belly breath, that can actually mess with your core contraction. So that's why breathing laterally sideways into your rib cage is important. So I would say visually looking at how you're breathing, and it's also, I find, quite helpful if you have a partner or somebody that can place their hand. So think about, for ladies, think of where your bra strap wraps around the side of your body. So you'd have someone place their palms on the side of your rib cage, kind of right where the bra strap wraps around. And then you're going to work on inhaling and trying to fill the space up into their palms. So that tactile feedback can be really helpful when women are trying to learn, and men for that matter too, then trying to learn how to breathe in sideways into their diaphragm and not up into their shoulders or out into their belly.
And that, that is such a good visual. I like that you brought that up, because most people have sort of a misconception that the breathing in Pilates and yoga is exactly the same. And you did mention belly breathing, which is much more yoga style breathing. Can you kind of further on describe the difference? If someone was to say, okay, should I take prenatal Pilates or prenatal yoga, or I've been doing both, and how are they helping them differently?
Yeah, I think that, there's obviously a variability between the types of classes that are offered. But in general, yoga is more meditative in nature. It's really great for stretching, releasing, potentially reducing feelings of fear or anxiety that you might have. It's just it's more, I would say, a bit more on the relaxing side in terms of prenatal. And then with what we're doing, like, a lot of the times women will be sore like a couple days later. Like, it is a workout, they will sweat. So it's sort of like training for labor. Labor is the most intense marathon you will likely ever go through. And so I'm of the mindset that yoga is a fantastic complement. I don't think it needs to be an either or situation. But the Pilates step that we teach is more sort of like, let's talk anatomy. Like, I'm going to pull up some diagrams. You're going to learn about, like, your ischial tuberosities and, like, what is the coccygeal muscle, and, like, okay, here's how we release it. Why is your piriformis an issue? Oh, because you have a sciatica. Like, we talk anatomy, and we kind of teach women also some tools that they can use at home to manage any discomfort they might be feeling, especially in the later stages of pregnancy.
Oh, that's so great. It just educating them, and the visuals is so valuable, right? Like that's, I've found one of the hardest parts. We can all kind of go, yeah, I know my bicep, my shoulder, but like my pelvic floor, where's that? How does it work? Right? Like it's so foreign. And you're right. It's kind of almost an awkward topic for so many, right? So I like that you're bringing that up and giving them that information. Another thing that kind of popped into my head to ask you, just to clarify, was if someone isn't doing, I'm a huge proponent of Pilates. And for me, I mean, I never knew about Pilates before I had babies. I did not know really so many things that I, wish now I had known, but I've learned now. So it's great. And I want to share. But the key thing is that I did not have an understanding of the pelvic floor and what was really going on, and didn't unfortunately discover Pilates, particularly core rehab and Pilates together, until much later. So if someone is pregnant and they're listening to this right now, and that's an ideal situation because they haven't yet, had their labor and delivery, perhaps possible, is it still okay to begin a Pilates program when pregnant?
Yeah, in fact, most of the people who come to me in their pregnancy have never done Pilates before.
Awesome. Okay.
Good. And so, 100%. I get that question a lot. But it's modifiable as well, in the sense that I'll say, like, and I see this in the online programs as well, like, if this doesn't feel good, try this instead, like challenge by choice, so to speak.
I like that. And that's already getting people to tune into their bodies, right? And I find that it's easy in pregnancy to kind of fall prey to, oh, well, everybody tells me I'm going to have back pain and I'm going to have this. And it's like to fall into the I'm probably going to have, acid reflux. But like, we're not always open or just listening to what's really going on. And when we can start to do that, especially with our deep inner core muscles, like you teach, it gives a full body and mind awareness.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that a lot of us are we're a little bit freaked out. Like, you're like, oh my God, like I don't have control anymore. I'm growing, everything's changing, my posture's changing, my boobs are changing, like I've got these weird food aversions. Like, there's a lot going on when you're pregnant. So
much going on. And not to mention the fear of like, oh, and then I have to push this thing out.
Well, yeah. Oh my God, I'll never forget my OB. So I was a week late. Yeah. And my OB looked at me and she's just like, I'm like, what's the deal? She's like, well, we don't have to induce you. You've got enough amniotic fluid. It's just a question, how big do you want to let this kid get?
Oh, jeez. You're like, whoa, now. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. She was over 8 pounds. So I was just like, okay, that's true. Yeah, I know. But luckily she came the next day. But still, I remember being a little freaked out. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, because it's natural fear inducing. And, maybe you can go into that. And I like that you said the birthing is actually, like a marathon, and that you can train for it instead of fear it, and because you're going to do it anyway, right? So how do you approach it with women such that they train up to it and they really buy into that instead of buying into like, the fear culture?
I mean, I'm a huge fan of Ina May Gaskin, so I send my students, like, a lot of she's got amazing books and her TED Talk, and, like, just reducing fear in general. I think it's an interesting world we live in. I remember, like, people, as soon as they see that you're pregnant, they love to share their labor horror story. Like, they think it's going to be helpful somehow. And, like, I've even said to students, I'm like, if you're, in the mall or somewhere in line and some random lady was like, oh, I was in labor for 40 hours, like, you can just be like, thank you for, wanting to share, but like, I'm dealing with, like, and just be respectful and just say, like, in a nice way, like, please stop. I'm, and there's nothing wrong with that. No. But it's a funny thing, like, there's a lot of this sort of, like, perpetuating the fear, which doesn't need to happen. And I think that there are lots of amazing workshops out there, like whether you gravitate towards just reading books like I did, there's hypnobirthing, there's a whole bunch of stuff. I think it's just maybe just hearing positive stories, because everyone's gonna try to project their own set of experiences on you.
So true. And can you tell us a little bit about what you've seen in terms of what happens when that fear, kind of takes over, in terms of the, physiologically, like I know for me that after I hurt my back, which wasn't necessarily related specifically to birth, but it was related to a weak core and pelvic floor and not rehabbing. And then I actually injured my back with an acute injury. And the fear I had after that, it set into my body kind of like a clenching pattern. And then I learned about the fact that that clenching can happen in advance of giving birth, such that you're so tight because you're in so much fear.
100%. It's a huge reason why, it's important that women find out, like, what's going on in their pelvic floor as well during pregnancy. I recommend all women go and see a pelvic floor physical therapist, because we can have a tension pattern, and that actually did a study. I would not have wanted to be part of the study, but they put these electrodes on women's pelvic floors and showed them scary movies. And sure enough, what do you think happened? Like, in response to the scary imagery, their pelvic floor is clenched. It's a vulnerable area. And so, we have this, you're probably familiar with the sphincter law. That's a famous midwife, Ina May Gaskin, the idea that, like, your pelvic floor, your jaw, like when you're stressed, you often clench your jaw. Well, the same thing kind of happens with your pelvic floor. And so you get this pain, fear, tension cycle. So when you have fear, you have more tension in your body, and then your experience of pain will be greater. You'll have more pain. And then the pain is going to cause more fear, and then that's going to cause more tension, which leads to more pain. And so it's a complete cycle, and we need to try to break that cycle somehow. And prior to giving birth, the important thing to do is psychologically reduce the fear so that you don't experience that tension and that pain.
So good. And I think what your suggestion was to tuning into positive birth experiences is a huge one. And, people do share the negative more often, and they're so forthcoming, as you mentioned. It's literally like anywhere, they don't know you, and they'll tell you the most intimate details you did not even want to know. And, you do have the right to cut them off and stop them and say, oh, well, I don't want to think about that, because sometimes you get something in your head and you literally cannot get it out, right?
Yeah, that and also I think being like realizing how strong you are. And so that's another piece to this, is to empower women to say, like, look what your body can do. Like, you're pregnant, you're not injured, you're not broken. Like, this is normal. Your body knows what to do. Learn to trust your body. And that's something that I try to do through the workouts. And that's why I actually make them pretty darn challenging. Because it's like, you know what? Like, you can do this. And obviously it's safe.
Yes.
It's 100% safe. But it's not easy.
No.
And I don't think I would be doing women a service if I made the exercises really easy.
Wow. I like that perspective. And I like the idea that you sort of kind of support them along the way while you're doing exercises by building up their resilience just through the movements, because you know that they're getting a safe workout. They don't have to question and like, oh, I should probably not be doing this because I'm in my third trimester. It's like, this was the workout designed for your third trimester, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. So you have your bump method, which is directly for pregnant women. Can you tell us a little bit about this program?
Yeah, it's for pregnant and postpartum women. So essentially right now, we do offer private training, both online and in person, as well as group classes here in the GTA. But the online programs are essentially, it's a full workout. And when I say full workout, it's an hour long. And there's a workout and each workout can be broken down into little sections. So a lot of us don't necessarily have a whole hour or the energy to do a whole hour workout. Yep. So you can break it down to like the stabilize section or the strengthen section or the posture section. And we do have that for each trimester. So there's an hour workout for the first trimester, for the second trimester, and then the third trimester. And in those workouts, which are all online, it's me training a woman who is actually in her first trimester, in her second trimester, and in her third trimester. So you can see what the movements will look like on a woman who is in that stage of pregnancy.
Oh, very cool. And then are you talking through the video?
Yeah, I'm actually teaching, so it's kind of like, it'll feel when you follow along, it'll feel like I'm actually talking to you.
I love that.
I'm cueing the woman and cueing the person who's following along the video. And then in postpartum, this is my favorite part, is that there were two women who were in the third trimester video, and we did it in real time. And so they had their babies. within 3 weeks of each other. And then, at 7 and 11 weeks postpartum, I was like, you guys ready for this, ladies? Let's do this.
That's
and so they were such good sports. So I actually shot the postpartum workout with the women who were actually 7 and 11 weeks postpartum, and they're same women who you follow along with in the third trimester.
Oh, I love the continuity of that. That's cool. That is so great. So people can really trust that those are safe for those time periods, and that you're actually not just saying, hey, come do this workout with me. You're teaching them.
Yeah.
One of the things I truly find to be amazing, in the videos I've seen of yours online is the cueing. And you brought that up, and I want to kind of just go right into that, because so many of us have been in fit classes, or had that trainer at the gym who's trying to cue you, and it really isn't. Maybe they're distracted looking at something else, or maybe they're just like, yep, down and up, or 1, 2, 3, or whatever kind of training. And you really cue the details. And even in your Insta posts and on your online stuff, like, it's so detailed. And that's what I think is really so valuable for women, and why I just so wanted to bring this to the forefront, is that educational component. Because when someone learns those cues from you, they can then bring them into other areas of their lives. Have you seen that to be a benefit?
Yeah, and I find that, like, if a student doesn't understand something, that's on me as the teacher. And so I need to get better at explaining it. And that's what I truly believe. And so I will have 5 cues to describe the same thing. And I'll ask them, do you get that? And now they're like, not really. And I'll try a different cue. And sometimes by the 3rd or 4th cue, they're like, oh, I like that cue. I'm like, great. So from now on, I'm going to say it like this, so that makes sense in your brain, So I think as teachers, and this isn't just in movement, but yeah, in general, like, it's on us as the teachers to find something that resonates with our students. And so much of this is also behind the scenes. So it's so difficult. So it's one thing to cue a bicep curl. It's another to cue, like, gently lifting your pelvic floor without clenching your butt and activating your deepest layer of abs. You know what I mean? It's a lot more nuanced. And so that takes a lot of confuse. Yeah, sorry,
not to cut you off, but how do you find the women, like, respond to it? I mean, I'm sure you've gotten the feedback online, but even in the actual studio, are people saying, it takes a while? Because I know I've found, like, people can be doing something for weeks and weeks before they actually can feel it. But what do you find?
Yeah, I think that women often, and men too, but I think it can be frustrating because we chase the burn. Like, we expect something to feel like I'm really feeling it. And a lot of the stuff is pretty subtle.
Subtle. That was the hardest thing for me, especially learning it after I had an injury, because I think once we're already sensitive, or we have something, in different positions down there, then it just feels like more nervous. I remember training so many people who had either a prolapse or some kind of injury that they just were uncertain, and if they felt it, was that a good thing, or was that oh no, I did something worse, right? How do you help women in that situation?
I mean, prolapse is a whole other conversation. There's so much fear surrounding pelvic organ prolapse, and I think that needs to change.
Yes.
And I know you agree, but how do you deal with it? I basically say, first of all, I say, don't chase the burn. Like, this isn't going to feel like, an insanity crunch workout. Right. Like, this is going to be a subtle feeling, and I also get them, like, if they're not very connected with the kinesthetic feeling, I get them to use their eyes. Like, maybe they're more visual, and I'll say, okay, what's going on in your tummy right now? Do you see it popping out a little bit? Okay, let's try it now. If I give you a different cue, let's see if you can prevent that pop. For instance, if they're trying to learn how to keep their TA engaged when their legs are in the air. And then they'll be like, oh, okay, I get it now. And also a variety of different positions. Like, some people really feel their TA, well on their back. Some people have to be on their hands and knees or lying on the side. So, just because you don't feel a muscle in one position, I'm not like, oh, well, you just don't get it. I'll be like, okay, let's try a different position,
Awesome. How great. And, the thing with it is that piece that is patience, because it's going to maybe take a few positions. But what it sounds like to me that you do with women so well is keep them sort of curious. As you mentioned, you, even in the beginning of this podcast, you're curious and you love learning, and you're approaching it with women such that they can be curious about their own bodies and not be intimidated.
yeah, I think that being curious about your body and wanting to learn and essentially take charge of your, especially your pelvic health, I think can be really empowering, and
So true.
it is empowering. And so to know that, you actually do have control over this to some extent.
Absolutely.
Obviously we don't have control over everything, but like there's a lot that we can do proactively. And, if you did unfortunately experience, any sort of pelvic floor trauma, or, you have an injury, or you're dealing with, stubborn diastasis recti, like prolapse, there's a lot of things that you can do. You don't just have to live with your discomfort or your leaking or anything. There's a lot you can do. And people are often reaching out saying, is it too late? My kids are in their teens. I'm like, no, it's not too late.
Great. Yes, I'm glad you said that, because that is such a common question. I know even Fitmamas listening are probably like, am I too far gone? And that's never, ever the case, right?
No.
Yeah. So could someone do effectively your 4th trimester program, which is the postpartum core rehab, 20, 30 years postpartum?
100%.
Yeah.
I actually created it for women also who are maybe about to go through some sort of a surgery or hysterectomy or bladder lift or anything, like any type of surgery. Like, this is a great rehab tool at any stage for any reason.
Oh, that's so good. So good. And I want to talk for a second, Nikki, about what you just mentioned around pelvic organ prolapse, the fears around it, and specifically what we can do in advance to protect against it and awareness-wise, and then also to, what we would do after.
I mean, there are a lot of reasons why a woman would be predisposed to prolapse. It can be genetic.
Okay.
It can be, lifestyle. So if you have, chronic constipation, chronic straining, like those things over time can build up. Can be as a result of, how your pushing stage went during labor. Mm-hmm. There's a lot. And unfortunately, I think a lot of women blame themselves, and they shouldn't.
No.
And so I just want to put that out there.
Thank you.
But yeah, I mean, prolapse is essentially, I think probably a lot of your listeners know what it is, but in a nutshell, it's when one of the 3 low-lying pelvic organs, your bladder, your uterus, or rectum, start to descend down towards the vagina. And, you might feel that heaviness or that bulging, and it's graded from 1 to 4. 4 being like it's quite low, like you can feel it, it's really kind of protruding out. And a grade 1 or a 2 is actually quite common postpartum, and you can do a lot with a grade 1 or a 2 to reverse that or to minimize it. Yeah, and I think working obviously with a pelvic floor physical therapist, I definitely recommend. It's got to be individual. I think I would love to be able to say, this is an online program, and if you do this, like, it creates something for prolapse. But the truth of the matter is that, depending on what kind of prolapse you have, you'll want to work on inversion. Those are very helpful.
Yeah.
Essentially bridges or legs up the wall or anything where your pelvis is ending up higher than your chest, just to help with gravity, like everything can come back up. But, there was this notion for a while that, like, we have to make sure that we don't lift anything heavy, and don't lift your baby, and don't lift the groceries. And, and that's the opposite of empowering. Like, that's so scary, right?
Yeah.
And, like, I'm sorry, but, like, how as a mom are you supposed to not pick up your kid?
There's no way. No.
Right? And so I'm more like, let's teach women how to do that, but in a safe, functional way. Yeah. And so part of that is learning how to breathe. I'm going to go back to breathing. If you're holding your breath, you're increasing what we call intra-abdominal pressure. Yeah. And that puts downward pressure on your pelvic floor, which is not good if you have prolapse. It's not good in general, but it's especially not good if you have prolapse. And so we have to make sure that we're breathing properly and we're not holding our breath. And we're able to perform these movements without putting unnecessary downward pressure on the pelvic floor.
Oh, that's so good. Something so good to remember, because I think so many of us don't even realize that we do hold our breath. And especially in exercise, if we aren't breathing, that creates such that pressure that really does make things worse. So thank you for bringing that up. If someone's not sure if they have a prolapse, or I know something you talk about a lot as well is diastasis recti postpartum. If someone's just not feeling right, how do they where do they go? Where do they begin? I agree with you, pelvic floor physio, go and check it out. Can they kind of look at themselves and have an idea? suggest? What do you recommend?
I mean, it's hard to tell if you have a grade 1 prolapse because you might not have symptoms. You might not even have symptoms with the grade 2. If you have that heaviness or that bulging, or if, like, for instance, a tampon or like a menstrual cup feels like it's falling out, or all of a sudden feels really uncomfortable, if sex is painful, there's a lot of signs. You could even Google, like, what are the signs that I have pelvic organ prolapse? There are lots of signs that you could kind of just see if a lot of those symptoms are something you're experiencing. You could go see your OB or your gynecologist. I'm definitely a proponent of pelvic floor physio, as you guys all know.
Yeah.
And I've posted several videos as it relates to diastasis too, on how to self-test.
Yes. Awesome.
And there's a ton of those videos on YouTube that people can look up as well. But some of them are better than others. I think we need to test not just the gap, but also how deep is the gap. We have to test slowly. We can't just stick our fingers in our belly button and then do a quick crunch. Right. There's a technique, as there is to everything.
Yes.
But yeah, I can certainly share some resources if you guys are interested.
Awesome. That's super handy. Well, we'll definitely link up to your video explaining that for sure. I have so many questions, and I just want to make sure that we get kind of everything that you wanted to make sure that you tell the Fitmamas. Is there something that stands out to you that you want to share? I mean, you've had such an amazing journey to follow online, and you have such great resources for women. So I know they're going to go there and find your videos and start doing them. But what was something else that you wanted to share today with all of us, Nikki?
I'll share that I'm 10 weeks pregnant again with my second. Yay. So I'm going to be sharing, I don't know when this is airing. I'm 10 weeks now. It's October 14th. So whenever this airs. So I'm going to be sharing a lot more content about pregnancy. Last time I didn't share as much because we had gone through IVF, and I didn't really publicly announce the pregnancy until I was 22 weeks.
Wow.
But I'm gonna do it a little earlier this time, and I've learned, and I've realized that God forbid, but if we do experience any type of loss, I would want to talk about it. I don't think there should be shame about that. And so instead of being sort of quiet, I'm going to just be very open and just say, this is what's going on. And I always encourage women to know that, they're not alone if they're struggling, whether it's with fertility or miscarriage or, their body image or, peeing their pants or any of this kind of crap, pain with sex. Like, there is nothing to be ashamed of, and you are not alone. So that's probably the number one thing I want women to know.
Oh my gosh, Nikki, that is such a great way to end it. And, I so agree. We are so quick to go into that place of shame. And for people like yourself, who you share so vulnerably, so beautifully, poetically, and inspirationally online, I must thank you. And I know you help so many other women in doing that. So thank you for breaking that stigma and really just putting yourself out there in that way for all of us to benefit. Thank you.
Oh, well, I'm just sharing because I also get a lot of benefit from it too. Like, as soon as you share, you realize that, I felt alone, and then I shared and I realized, oh my God, I'm not alone. Like, we need to make sure that everybody shares so that nobody feels alone, So
yes, and that is one of the worst feelings that can bring you down a dark, dark spiral, is that feeling of loneliness. So the community that I know you create, and the Fitmama community, to have others that we can share what's really going on, and it doesn't have to be, fake reality on Instagram, right? It's the actual reality.
It's very true. I think it's very important. It's so easy, as you know, just to sort of, new moms are at home feeding their kids, feeling so isolated. We were meant to raise our kids in tribes, and we're not. We're alone in our houses, and comparing ourselves to other people who seem to be killing it. And we're like, fuck, I'm screwing up.
Oh, I know. Do people come to you talking about how they feel anxiety when they look on social media, or depression?
Yeah, I've got it a lot, and I get a lot of the body image stuff,
Yes.
which it's a lot, right? I get a lot of that, the postpartum anxiety. I had a lot of struggles with nursing, and I opened up with that.
Yes, you did exclusively pumping, didn't you?
I did. I pumped for 10 months.
That was intense. Good for you.
And I'm really proud of that. And I was lucky that I had enough supply, and I know a lot of women don't have supply, and I would say to them, like, don't ever let anybody tell you you're not trying hard enough, because that was something that I remember internalizing myself. Like, I'm not trying hard enough to get her to latch. I'm like, I'm going mental.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just gonna do what's best for me and my kid, and that's okay, and we can't compare to other people,
Yeah, well, and what a good point, having someone else tell you aren't trying hard enough. Like, how on earth would they know? And is there anything more demeaning at a time when you need help, right? Oh my god.
Yeah, don't be friends with them anymore.
Yeah, those are not your people. Okay. Oh my gosh, Nikki, this is such an honor. I'm so grateful and appreciative of your time and all you do. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me and for all that you do for moms and your podcast, and I'm very happy to be part of it.
Thank you, Nikki. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
Wow, right? How good was that? She is such a wealth of information, and she has such a big breadth of knowledge in the pelvic floor, in the deep abdominals, and with her background in Pilates and dance, she really knows what she's talking about. And if you're pregnant or postpartum and you haven't yet done her programs, I cannot recommend anything more, because following along what she recommends to do, she really understands it. She really knows. She's gone through it herself. Now she's going through, as you know, time number 2. And she's already been sharing so much great info online. So go follow her, do programs as you go along with your pregnancy or postpartum journey, and trust that you are doing the best for your core. Thanks so much, Nikki, for being here on the podcast. Once again, it is such an honor to have you on the Fitmama podcast. Enjoy, share this with someone, please, and write a review on your podcast player, Fitmama. We appreciate it. Thank you so much. Namaste.